You are entering the world of shadows, a place where even the gods once feared to tread. Here you are guided by Itzamna, the god of writing and shadows, his name now just a whisper on forgotten lips. He is a god of secrets, of knowledge lost to time. You might catch the faintest echo of his name, but it's drowned out by the vast silence surrounding it. Itzamna, once a revered god, now a shadow on the very edge of memory. Long before their great civilizations collapsed, scribes would gather in secret. Under the flickering light of a single candle, their skilled hands carved the language of the gods into bark or sacred paper. They weren't just writers, they were keepers of divine knowledge, entrusted to them by Itzamna himself. His influence was profound, but it was never meant for everyone. Only the chosen, those deemed worthy, were allowed to touch the sacred glyphs that held his essence. They say Itzamna was the first to write the laws of existence, the balance of life and death, creation and destruction, all carved into the sky itself as the divine blueprint of the cosmos. His pen wasn't just a simple tool, it was an instrument of divine will. The creation of the universe was a story written in the stars, and Itzamna was its eternal scribe. He held the knowledge of everything, from life and death to the sacred and the profane, the light and the darkness. His writings were not of ink and paper, but of cosmic truths woven into the very fabric of the universe. But like all gods, Itzamna's existence wouldn't remain unchallenged. The other gods who shared the heavens with him grew fearful of the power he held. Knowledge, after all, is a double-edged sword. It can illuminate, but it can also blind. Itzamna's knowledge, as pure as it was, began to threaten the order the other gods had so carefully constructed, so they decided to act. The story of his downfall isn't one of epic battles, but of subtle, complete erasure. Over time, even the name Itzamna became a forgotten echo. Yet, whispers remain. Small fragments of his name are carried through the ages, passed from one generation to the next. Even today, in the quietest corners of the world, if you listen carefully, you might hear his name murmured in the wind. But these whispers are all that's left. The sacred texts, the ancient codices, all those written words that once held his divine wisdom have vanished. What was once sacred is now cursed. What was holy is now unspoken. The few scribes who remain no longer write in his name, for doing so is to invite shadows that cannot be escaped. You feel a chill as the wind stirs. It's the breath of something older, something beyond time. Itzamna's legacy isn't just in the knowledge he gave, but in the silence that followed. A silence so complete, so all-encompassing, that it has driven the world to forget him. And yet, you have to wonder, his story was erased from history. Why do you feel his presence so strongly right now? Why, in the darkest corners of the world, do scribes still speak of him, even if they dare not say his name? The world has forgotten, but the shadows remember. Before we continue, remember this. The gods, like the winds, are never truly gone. They only fade, their forms shifting in the dark, their voices carried on the breath of the forgotten. Now let us continue this journey, because there is so much more to discover. If you're intrigued by these lost tales, make sure to subscribe and join us as we uncover more secrets hidden in the shadows. Thanks for watching. Have you ever wondered where stories come from? Not just the ones we tell, but the very first story, the one that shaped reality itself. Today we journey into the heart of Mayan mythology to meet a god who wasn't born, but who simply was. He is Itzamna, the first scribe, the divine author of the cosmos. They say Itzamna was born from the vast emptiness of the cosmos. Before him, there was only chaos, formless and wild. But from this chaos, he brought order. How? With words. In the great stillness of creation, Itzamna whispered into the void, his voice the first sound in an empty universe. "Let there be writing," he declared, and the ink of the universe began to flow. From his mouth came the first glyphs, symbols that would become the foundation of all knowledge. But these were not just letters. Each symbol was a living force, each word a spell, each sentence a pathway to understanding the cosmos. The twinkling stars above weren't random. They were a celestial map, deliberately etched there by Itzamna's divine hand. He didn't just write the world into existence. He encoded it. He laid out the path of every star, the rhythm of every river, and the fate of every creature. Time itself was his creation, a grand tapestry of past, present, and future, unfolding like an ancient manuscript. But Itzamna knew that true knowledge isn't just about answers. It's also about the mystery. For every truth he wrote, he left a shade of a secret, a hidden meaning, a riddle that could never be fully solved. His writings were like the stars themselves, bright and shining, yet often obscured by clouds. The deeper one looked, the more one found, and the more one knew, the more there was to be hidden. Itzamna's gift of writing wasn't just for creation, but also for control. With his words, he shaped the fabric of reality with the elegance of a master calligrapher. He wrote the very code that governed the powers of the other gods, the laws that kept them in check. In doing this, he became more than a god. He became the very essence of the universe. And that's why the other gods grew afraid of him. But with such immense power comes immense danger. Itzamna's writings, so pure and so vast, began to seep into the minds of those who tried to read them. The Mayan scribes, chosen to interpret his divine words, found themselves drawn deeper and deeper into the mystery. It wasn't enough to just read the glyphs. They wanted to understand the hidden meanings, to decipher the divine code. The first scribe to fall into this shadow was a man named Kainich. A brilliant scholar, he became obsessed. He spent weeks in isolation, poring over the sacred texts, convinced there was a deeper truth just beneath the surface. Driven by an insatiable thirst for knowledge, Kainich began to break the sacred rules, performing forbidden rituals to call upon Itzamna's power. It's said that during one of these rituals, a shadow fell across the room, engulfing him in darkness. His body remained in the temple, but his mind was lost, consumed by the very knowledge he sought. Kainich's mind became a prison, a labyrinth of fragmented thoughts and visions, where Itzamna's words echoed endlessly. The glyphs, once a source of enlightenment, became the chains that bound him to the shadows. He had become the first of the cursed scribes, those who sought too much and were consumed by the shadows of knowledge. Itzamna had created the universe with his words, but now his words were creating madness. The divine knowledge he had crafted was never meant to be fully understood. It was a riddle wrapped in a shadow, a puzzle whose pieces could never quite fit together. The scribes who followed Kainich continued to study Itzamna's works, each one falling deeper into the abyss, becoming vessels for the divine madness Itzamna had left behind. They had sought to uncover the mysteries of the universe, and in doing so, they had lost their souls. This story makes you wonder, doesn't it? Itzamna's gift was one of creation, but it was also one of destruction. His knowledge, like all knowledge, was a double-edged sword. The more you learn, the more you risk losing a part of yourself. What is the price of knowledge? And what happens when the lines between creation and destruction begin to blur? Itzamna's universe may have been divine, but it was not without cost. Thank you for joining us on this dive into mythology. If you enjoyed this story, be sure to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss our next adventure into the past. As you step further into this forgotten realm, the air grows heavy. Only echoes of sacred rituals remain here, half remembered, half forgotten. The presence of the god Itzamna looms larger now, ancient shadows stretching across time, casting its dark influence over all who dare seek his knowledge. But among the remnants of his reign, one ritual stands apart, a ritual so sacred that even the other gods dared not speak of it. This was the scribe's blessing, a forbidden act meant to open the mind to Itzamna's divine wisdom. To invoke it, a scribe would kneel in silence before the sacred codices, those ancient texts carrying the very essence of Itzamna's knowledge. The blessing wasn't a simple prayer. It was an act of communion, of binding oneself to the god of writing and surrendering to his divine will. The ritual was always performed at dusk, the moment between day and night when the world itself seems to hold its breath. The scribe would begin by writing the first glyph of Itzamna's sacred language, the one representing the god's name, an ancient mark said to contain the power of creation itself. They would whisper this name into the winds, as if inviting Itzamna to enter the sacred space. It was here, at this threshold, that the true ritual began. Candlelight flickered, casting long shadows that seemed to dance across the walls, moving in rhythm with the scribe's own heartbeat. The scribe would then take a sacred blade, fashioned from obsidian and consecrated in ancient ceremonies, and cut a small mark on the palm of their hand. This wasn't an act of pain, but a symbolic offering the blood, a token of the scribe's devotion. their willingness to sacrifice their very essence for the divine wisdom they sought. As the blood pooled on their palm, the scribe would place their hand upon the codex, allowing the warmth of their life force to mingle with the ink of the gods. It was said that at this moment, Itzamna would whisper directly into the scribe's mind, filling them with visions of the ancient cosmos. These were not just visions of the material world, but of the unseen forces that governed it, the weavings of fate, the flows of time, the eternal struggle between light and darkness. For those deemed worthy, the blessing was a gift beyond compare. Their minds were open to the divine, their hands guided by unseen forces, their words carrying the power of the gods themselves. But this blessing, though revered, was not without its price. For every scribe who received it, there were others who failed the test. To fail meant to lose oneself to the shadows, to be consumed by the very knowledge they sought to master. There was a thin line between enlightenment and madness, and those who crossed it were lost forever. It said the failed scribes would hear whispers in the night voices that spoke of things beyond their understanding, things no mortal mind should ever comprehend. The shadows would twist and grow around them until they became nothing more than empty shells, our souls hollowed out by forbidden knowledge. And yet, despite the risks, the ritual continued. Scribes, drawn by the promise of divine insight, would offer themselves to Itzamna, their lives caught in a cycle of devotion and madness. Some sought wisdom, others power, but all were drawn by the same irresistible force, the ability to write the very laws of existence. What they failed to understand was that Itzamna's knowledge was never meant to be fully grasped by mortals. It was a gift that could only be received in part. For to take it all was to invite annihilation. Over time, the ritual became more and more obscure. It was whispered that Itzamna himself had ceased to answer, that the connection between the divine and mortal realms had been severed. But still, the scribes continued, even as the shadows grew thicker. They wrote and wrote and wrote, a desperate attempt to recall the lost knowledge. Even now, in the quietest corners of the world, there are those who practice the scribe's blessing in secret, hoping to unlock the ancient power that Itzamna once imparted. They believe the rituals haven't been truly forgotten, that the god's power still lingers, waiting to be awakened. But those who speak of it now do so in hushed tones, for they know the price. The shadows, once distant, are closer than ever. There are rumors of a lost codex, a book written by the last of the scribes who received the blessing, containing the full details of the ritual. It's said to be hidden deep within the ruins of a forgotten temple, sealed away to prevent further corruption. But no one has ever found it, not those who have ventured in search of it have never returned. The shadows, it seems, are not content to be forgotten. They are waiting. And you too find yourself drawn to these whispers. What is it that you seek? Knowledge, power, enlightenment, or something darker? The scribe's blessing was never a simple gift. It was a covenant, a bond between the divine and the mortal that could not be broken. Those who received it were changed forever. You sensed the pull of the ancient words, the invitation to cross the threshold into realms unseen. But you must ask yourself, what is the cost of that knowledge? What happens when the shadows consume you? You have been warned, but even so, you can feel the yearning deep within. The ritual calls to you, its whispers soft and insistent. Will you resist, or will you write your name into the eternal darkness? Thanks for watching. If you enjoy exploring these forgotten mysteries, be sure to like and subscribe. As you press on, the shadows around you deepen. The name Itzamna seems to hum in the air, a whisper that grows clearer with each step. It's in these very shadows, stretching from a time long forgotten, that the curse was born. A curse that still echoes through the ages, a chilling remnant of forgotten days. The first curse of Itzamna is said to have started in the mind of a scribe. His thirst for knowledge was so immense, so powerful, that it fractured the very balance of reality. You can feel a shiver run down your spine as the story begins to unfold, the weight of ancient wisdom pressing in on you. His name was Kanich, the first scribe to fall to the shadows of Itzamna's knowledge. But he wasn't always the empty shell he became. In his prime, he was brilliant, a true artist of glyphs, a scholar revered by all. His mind was sharp, his hand was steady, and his devotion to the god of writing was second to none. It was said that his writing brought the words to life, that the ink on his pages glowed with a faint light, as if the god's own breath flowed through it. His texts were treasured, his codices treated like sacred relics. Kings and scholars traveled far and wide just to seek his wisdom, but Kainich's mind, like any mind that seeks the deepest truths, couldn't resist the temptation of the unknown. And in that darkness, he stumbled upon the first curse. It all started innocently. Kainich began hearing whispers, soft voices speaking to him from the pages of his books. At first, they were just murmurs, fleeting and easy to ignore. But as his obsession with knowledge grew, so did the voices. They would call to him in the dead of night, in the quiet solitude of his temple, urging him to look deeper, to find truths no mortal was ever meant to know. The voices spoke of things beyond our world of gods, older than Itzamna, of realms where light and darkness were one, and of a language that could unlock the universe's greatest secrets. The words were ancient, older than the codices themselves, and they began to seep into Kainich's mind, slowly unraveling his sanity. One night, sitting alone in his chamber, the voices grew louder, more insistent. They told him to perform a forbidden ritual, one that would open his mind to the full power of Itzamna's knowledge. They whispered of a hidden glyph, a symbol concealed for centuries, that could grant him access to all the knowledge of the gods. But this wasn't just any glyph. It was a key, a gateway to realms beyond our own, where the nature of reality itself could be rewritten. In his desperation for understanding, Kainich began to trace the forbidden symbol on the floor of his temple, his hands trembling with a mix of fear and excitement. The moment the glyph was complete, a heavy shadow fell over him. The curse had begun. It wasn't an instant transformation. At first, Kainich felt nothing but enlightenment. An overwhelming flood of understanding washed over him, as if the universe had opened its doors. He could read the most complex codices with ease, deciphering obscure symbols as if they were simple words. Knowledge poured into him like a river, filling every corner of his mind, pushing out everything else, leaving only the god's voice. For a short time, he felt invincible, the master of all knowledge. But then, the shadows took hold. The more Kainich learned, the more he was followed by a creeping darkness. He started losing touch with the world around him, his sense of reality slipping away, piece by piece. His body remained, but his mind was no longer his own. The voices grew louder, more demanding, forcing him to write until there was nothing left of him. The ink on the page became a black river, threatening to pull him under. And still, he wrote. The curse wasn't just about losing his mind. It was a spiritual decay, a slow erosion of Kainich's very soul. His writing began to change. The beautiful glyphs he once crafted with such care became jagged and distorted. The words that flowed from his hand were not his. They were the product of the shadows that had taken root in his soul. He couldn't control what he wrote, and the more he wrote, the deeper the curse became. His eyes, once bright with divine knowledge, turned dull and hollow. His hands, once so graceful, trembled under the burden of the words they were forced to create. The other scribes who sought his guidance noticed the change. At first, they thought it was just the weight of the sacred knowledge he carried. But soon, the signs of the curse were undeniable. Kainich's eyes never left his codices. He no longer looked at people, no longer spoke to them. His once magnificent temple, filled with divine light, became a place of darkness, humming with whispers too deep to comprehend. The air grew thick with a sense of decay, and the walls seemed to close in. One by one, the other scribes left, too afraid to stay. But Kainich couldn't stop. The curse demanded he continue, writing the forbidden words, calling upon Itzamna's name in ways no one had ever dared. And as he wrote, he sealed his own fate. He had become the first of the cursed scribes, the first to fall into an endless abyss of knowledge. In the end, Kainich was consumed, a hollow vessel whose soul was lost to the very shadows he sought to master. Now, as you stand in this sacred place, the curse lingers in the air, thick and heavy. You can almost hear the faint whisper of Kainich's final words, carried on the winds of time. Was he just a victim of his own curiosity? Or did the knowledge he craved turn against him, twisting him into something else entirely? The first curse of Itzamna remains, a shadow waiting for the next person who dares to seek the god's forbidden wisdom. And you have to wonder, will it find you next? Thanks for watching, and if you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like and subscribe for more. The shadows of Itzamna stretch further now, and with them, a deeper mystery unfolds. This isn't just about lost knowledge. It's about a deliberate, total erasure. Think about it. What good is wisdom if it threatens to unravel the very power of the gods? After the scribe Cainich descended into madness, and a curse fell upon those who followed him, the gods got scared. The divine order they had so carefully built was suddenly at risk. Itzamna, in his endless quest for knowledge, had crossed a line. His words were too powerful, his glyphs too dangerous. And so, the first major act of divine intervention wasn't creation, it was destruction. Itzamna, once praised as the god of writing, became a god erased. Wiped from all memory, all history, as if he had never existed. The gods were ruthless, systematically removing every trace of his influence. His temples were torn down, his scribes silenced, his sacred books burned. But that wasn't enough. They had to erase his very name, to bury his existence so deep that no mortal would ever speak it again. This was a spiritual purge, an attempt to sever all connections to the god whose knowledge threatened the entire cosmic order. Itzamna's name was struck from every text, every inscription, every glyph that bore his mark. The books filled with his teachings were scattered to the winds, buried where no one would ever think to look. The sacred language of Itzamna, once a divine tool, was lost. Its symbols became gibberish, its meaning a fading ghost of a forgotten age. The god of writing and shadows became a myth, a barely there whisper. So why go to such extreme lengths to erase him? The answer lies in the sheer power of his knowledge. The words Itzamna wrote weren't just for communication. They were the very building blocks of the universe. Each glyph, each symbol, was a key to understanding the divine order itself. And to understand it was to control it. To control it was to challenge the gods themselves. The very fabric of reality could be rewritten, and the order the gods had so carefully crafted could completely unravel. This was something the gods could not allow. In their fear, they invoked a ritual of divine amnesia spell that erased not just the memories of mortals, but the very traces of Itzamna's existence. They tried to wipe the slate clean, burying the god in the tomb of forgotten history. His name was cursed, never to be spoken. His symbol was banned from sacred texts. Even the scribes who once wrote in his name were silenced, their memories of him erased. In the temples, in the courts, in the sacred halls, Itzamna was never mentioned. He was no longer a god to be worshipped, but a god to be forgotten. The full extent of this erasure is still unknown. Some say the gods themselves gathered to seal away all knowledge of Itzamna, casting a spell so powerful it reached into the very hearts of his followers. Others whisper of a hidden codex, a single book containing the last remnants of Itzamna's writings, locked away in a forgotten jungle temple, buried beneath layers of earth and time. But this codex, if it even exists, has never been found. The question of how a god can be erased from existence has haunted scholars for centuries. Itzamna wasn't just removed from history, he was buried beneath time itself. But there's something deeply unsettling about this. In erasing Itzamna, did the gods truly destroy his knowledge? Or did they just hide it, burying it so deep that it could never be spoken again? Some argue that knowledge can't truly be erased. Once a truth is written, once a word is spoken, it leaves a trace, an imprint on the world. Even gods can't completely erase something once it's been revealed. So, there are those who believe Itzamna's knowledge still exists in hidden corners of the world, just waiting to be rediscovered. The forbidden books, the shadowed glyphs, they aren't gone. They're just waiting for someone brave enough to look where others have forgotten. But there's a danger in seeking what was meant to be lost. To search for Itzamna's knowledge is to invite the shadows that come with it. The curse that fell upon the first scribe still lingers, waiting for anyone who gets too close to the truth. The knowledge of the gods is not for mortal hands. The more you seek, the more you risk being consumed by the very darkness you hope to understand. You can feel the weight of this truth now, heavy in your chest. The more you learn, the more you realize that the erasure of Itzamna was not the end of his story, it was only the beginning. The shadows that follow his name aren't gone. They linger, waiting for the right moment, the right person, to call upon them again. And as you stand here, surrounded by the remnants of a forgotten god, you wonder if the truth of Itzamna's erasure wasn't an act of destruction, but an act of waiting. Waiting for someone who would dare to uncover what was never meant to be found. And in that waiting, you hear the faintest whisper. Itzamna's name, still alive, still calling from the darkness. Thanks for watching. If you're as intrigued by this as I am, make sure to subscribe for more deep dives into forgotten histories. The shadows draw closer now, as you are led deeper into the labyrinth of forgotten knowledge. Itzamna's name is no longer a whisper. It is a faint hum in the air, a voice from another realm calling to you from the depths. But it is not just the name that lingers, it is the knowledge that was never meant to be known. The codices, the sacred texts that once held Itzamna's divine wisdom, have not been entirely lost. There is still one that remains hidden, sealed away, its contents untouched by the hands of time. It was written by the last scribe who dared to continue Itzamna's work. This scribe was not a man of great fame or noble birth. He was a humble scholar, a keeper of words, caught between the divine and the mortal, between the known and the unknowable. The story of the last scribe begins in a temple long abandoned, buried beneath the roots of ancient trees. It was here that he found his purpose. He had heard the whispers, faint at first, but growing clearer with each passing day. The name Itzamna echoed through his dreams, and with it, a relentless call to write. The scribe could not resist. He knew the dangers of seeking what was lost, of uncovering what was meant to remain buried. Yet, he was drawn to it, the allure of forbidden knowledge that could rewrite the very laws of the universe. The codices of Itzamna, scattered to the winds, called to him as if they were alive. In secret, he set to work, writing in the dead of night by the dim glow of a single candle. His hand moved with a mind of its own, tracing the ancient glyphs that once carried the power of creation. With every stroke, the scribe felt his consciousness expand, as if the god's very essence flowed through him. He began to understand the true nature of the words he was writing, and with that understanding came a terrible realization. The words were not just letters on a page. They were portals to a hidden world that existed beyond time, beyond the mortal plane. A world of shadows and light, where reality itself could be bent and rewritten. The scribe knew he had uncovered something dangerous. He could feel the weight of this knowledge pressing down on him, threatening to overwhelm his mind. And yet, he could not stop. The ink flowed from his quill as if it had a life of its own, drawing him into the very fabric of the cosmos. The glyphs, once sacred, now pulsed with a dark energy, each one a step further into the unknown. His visions grew more vivid, saw realms beyond the stars, glimpsed the true nature of the gods, and even witnessed the birth and death of worlds. In these moments, he truly understood Itzamna's power. It was not just knowledge, but control over the very essence of reality. But with this understanding came the curse. The more the scribe wrote, the more the shadows seemed to press in on him. The temple, once a place of quiet reverence, became a prison. The walls seemed to close in, the air thick with the weight of the god's knowledge. The voices that had once whispered now shouted, urging him to continue to write, to unlock the final secret. And so, the scribe wrote, his hand trembling, his mind fraying at the edges. He lost track of time, of the world outside the temple. The glyphs on the page became an endless spiral, drawing him deeper and deeper into the void. It is said that the last scribe's final entry was unlike any other. As he wrote, his hand began to shake uncontrollably, as though the very essence of the words was trying to escape him. His vision blurred. He could no longer tell where the ink ended and the shadows began. In his final moments, the scribe wrote one last glyph, a symbol never seen before, a symbol that shimmered and shifted as though it were alive. This final glyph was said to contain the entire universe, sum of all knowledge and all existence, wrapped in a single, impossible mark. But the scribe never finished. His quill fell from his hand, and his body crumbled to dust, as if the very act of writing had consumed him. His name, like Itzamna's, was lost to time, his body and soul vanishing into the shadows. The codex he had written remained, hidden in the depths of the temple, its pages now bound in shadow, unread by any living soul. The last scribe gave his life for the knowledge he sought, but in the end, he became just a memory, a fleeting echo of a god long forgotten. The codex, if it still exists, remains a mystery. Some say it lies deep beneath the earth, its pages waiting for a seeker brave enough to face the darkness. Others claim it was destroyed, consumed by the very forces it sought to understand, but the truth remains hidden, just out of reach. The shadow of the last scribe, like Itzamna's curse, continues to haunt the world, waiting for the right moment to resurface. And you, drawn by the same whispers that lured the scribe, cannot help but wonder, what lies within those pages? What knowledge does the codex hold? Is it a path to enlightenment, or is it the final step into madness? The answer is just beyond your reach, a tantalizing mystery that refuses to be unraveled. But you feel the pull, the same pull that drove the scribe to write his last words. The last scribe is gone, but his work remains. The codex waits in the shadows, and the knowledge of Itzamna, though hidden, is not gone. Thank you for joining me on this journey into the unknown. If you enjoyed this story, be sure to like and subscribe for more tales from the shadows. In the deepest parts of the jungle, there is a place untouched by time, where the echoes of an ancient god still resonate. A temple, long abandoned, its walls consumed by nature, its stones weathered by centuries of silence. But in the presence of Itzamna, the god of writing and shadows, silence is never truly empty. This ruin was once the center of the scribes' sacred work, a place where they would kneel before their codices, seeking divine insight. Imagine it in its prime, a place of solemn reverence, the air thick with incense and sacred prayers. The walls, covered in ancient glyphs, glowed with a faint light, as though the god's presence lingered within the very stones. Scribes would sit in the heart of the temple, surrounded by codices, their quills poised, waiting for Itzamna to speak to them, for his wisdom to guide their hands. Entering the temple was a ritual in itself. The doorway was carved with glyphs, telling the story of creation, the first word that shaped the universe. The first symbol that brought order to chaos. To cross the threshold was to step into a sacred space where mortal minds could touch the divine. The inner sanctum hummed with a faint power, a space where the veil between worlds grew thin. At its center was an altar carved from obsidian stone, so dark it seemed to absorb all light. This was no mere place of offerings. It was a conduit, a channel for Itzamna's wisdom to flow into the world. Here, scribes would place their hands, feeling the cool stone, tracing ancient symbols. The altar was said to resonate with divine knowledge, a place where a writer would open themselves to the flow of sacred words. But in the silence of time, this space has been forgotten. The altar, once alive with power, is now a hollow stone. The walls, once etched with sacred teachings, are cracked and faded. The vines that climb the walls and the roots that snake through the broken floor seem to carry the weight of forgotten knowledge, holding on to echoes of the past. No one remembers the last time the temple was used, or who walked its halls before the shadows swallowed it. Some say the last scribe, driven to madness by what he had uncovered, was the final visitor. Others claim the temple was abandoned long before. Whatever the truth, its silence is heavy. The silence of a place where something sacred has been buried, where something powerful has been forgotten. Yet if you listen closely, you might hear the faintest echo, a whisper, a name lingering in the Itzamna. The temple may be lost, but it is not entirely gone. The glyphs may be weathered, but they haven't disappeared. The altar may be cold, but it holds the imprint of those who knelt before it. The god of writing and shadows is not truly gone, only waiting, hidden beneath the weight of time and silence. The air itself holds the memory of forgotten rituals, of knowledge that was meant to remain hidden. Those who venture too close feel a pull, a beckoning that can't be ignored. The shadows here are not of darkness, but of wisdom buried and left to fade. But knowledge, like shadows, never truly disappears. It waits. It lingers. Scholars have searched. Explorers have ventured deep into the jungle, but none have returned with answers. The temple is as much a part of the landscape as the roots that twist through the earth. The world may have turned away from Itzamna, but this place holds a secret no one can escape. It is a place where the line between the divine and mortal blurs, where knowledge and madness intertwine. You can't help but wonder, is the temple a place of enlightenment, or is it a prison? Prison for knowledge never meant to be understood for those who dared to seek the wisdom of the gods. The answer, perhaps, lies in the silence itself. temple waits for someone to uncover what has been buried, and perhaps to awaken the god hidden within its walls for so long. Thanks for joining us on this journey. If you love exploring forgotten histories and ancient mysteries, be sure to subscribe and follow for more. As you push deeper into the forgotten temple, a chilling presence grows stronger. The shadow of Itzamna, the lost god, stretching out. It's whispering to you in a language you can't place, but feel deep in your bones. There is something both captivating and terrifying in the way the darkness seems to writhe and pulse with a life of its own. As if it's not just an absence of light, but something more, something ancient and powerful. You soon realize it's not just the god of writing hiding here, something far older, something that desperately wants to remain unfound. Suddenly, symbols begin to appear on the cold stone of the forgotten halls. They're etched into the walls, barely visible at first. But as the torchlight flickers, they sharpen, growing darker, as if waiting for this very moment to reveal themselves. These markings are unlike any known glyphs. They don't belong to the language of the gods or any mortal script. They're something else entirely, something forbidden. Legend calls them the unholy language of Itzamna script, said to transcend time, space, and reality itself. The scribes who dared to study these symbols often met grim fates. Many disappeared without a trace, while others were driven mad by the sheer force of what they were trying to comprehend. They were drawn to these markings like a moth to a flame, irresistibly pulled by the allure of the unknown. But once they stared too long, once they tried to decipher the meaning behind the glyphs, there was no turning back. The curse of Itzamna wasn't just a consequence of forbidden knowledge. It was the price of understanding what should never be understood. One of the most unsettling things about these symbols is their fluidity. Unlike the fixed glyphs of known languages, these marks are alive. They shift and twist on the stone, as if written in a script with no set form. The longer you stare, the more they seem to move, morphing into impossible shapes. It's a symbol that looks like a simple circle might suddenly elongate into a spiral, then twist into a serpentine form, only to unravel into a chaotic mess of lines and angles. But it wasn't just their movement that was terrifying, it was their meaning. No scholar ever fully decoded them. The symbols defied all logic, shattering the minds of even the most brilliant who tried. Any texts that might have described these glyphs have been lost, destroyed along with the memory of Itzamna's original teachings. Yet fragments remain faint, carvings in forgotten temples and secret journals kept by those who dared to look. Some believe these symbols are the key to unlocking Itzamna's full power. That they are not just writing, but a spell capable of reshaping the very fabric of reality. To speak them, to write them, is to invite the shadows in, to bend the universe to your will. But the cost is always terrifyingly high. There's a story of a scribe named Yakskin, a brilliant mind obsessed with these forbidden symbols. He spent years in secret, copying the glyphs into his personal codex, desperate to unlock their power. But each time he thought he was close to a breakthrough, the symbols would shift again, slipping just beyond his grasp, as if mocking him. The more he learned, the deeper into darkness he fell. One night, it's said that Yakskin finally found a symbol that didn't shift. It was a simple mark, a straight line crossing a circle. As he traced it, the air grew ice cold. The walls of his chamber seemed to close in, and a thick, impenetrable shadow emerged from the stone itself. The darkness swallowed him whole. His codex was later found abandoned, open to that very page. No trace of Yakskin was ever seen again. Some whisper that his mind, consumed by the symbol, still wanders the void between worlds. These unholy symbols are more than just marks on a wall. They are a doorway to something darker than the god himself. A passage into a realm where the laws of gods and mortals don't apply, where time, space, and knowledge are fluid and ever-shifting. It's a realm the gods themselves fear, for within it, their power is meaningless. And so, they erased Itzamna and his teachings, hoping to sever the mortal world from the void that lies beyond. But the shadows remain. The symbols, though buried, have never truly disappeared. They are still out there, waiting for someone foolish enough to seek them. Now, as you stand before this forgotten altar, the symbols seem to flicker at the edge of your vision, beckoning you forward. They are calling to you, just as they called to the scribes of old. You know the stories, you know the cost. You know that once you look too closely, once you begin to understand, there may be no coming back. and yet you feel the pull, the whisper of the symbols, the promise of knowledge, of power. The choice, as always, is yours. Thanks for watching. The shadows press in around you, thicker now, as if the very air has grown heavy with ancient secrets. And in this darkness, something stirs, a presence that cannot be ignored. It said that somewhere in the world there exists a book unlike any other. It's not filled with mere words, but with names. Names that are not just sounds, but the very essence of existence. It's called the Book of Names, though few remember that title now. This is a text so powerful that to speak the names within it is to give them form, to breathe life back into them, and to bind them to your will. The book, legend says, was written by the god Itzamna himself, not with ink and parchment, but with the very breath of the universe, the divine threads that hold reality together. Itzamna's knowledge wasn't just of creation, it was of existence itself, of the primal forces that shaped life and death, time and space. And in his infinite wisdom, he recorded the names of all things, gods, mortals, and even those beings who exist beyond our comprehension. Every star, every tree, every breath of wind each had a name, and each name carried with it the power to shape the world. But the Book of Names isn't a simple list. It's a map of the universe, a guide to the deepest, most hidden realms of reality. Each name isn't just a label, but a key to unlocking the deepest mysteries of existence. To speak the name of a god, for instance, is to summon that god, to call them forth from the shadows into the realm of the living. But it's not just gods, it's everything. The trees that sway in the wind, the insects that crawl beneath the earth, the mountains that rise from the ground, each name contains a power that can alter the world. For those who knew how to wield it, the Book of Names was a tool of unimaginable power. It could change the course of history, shape the future, and control the very fabric of reality. But there was always a cost. To speak the names within the book was unjust to summon the entities they represented. It was to bind them to your will. And with every binding, the user's soul became entangled with the names they invoked, until they were no longer separate from the entities they sought to control. Their bodies would weaken, their minds would fray, and their very essence would begin to fade into the shadows they had once called forth. The first to truly unlock the book's power was a scribe named Ahau. He wasn't the greatest of scholars, but he was drawn to its forbidden promise. Unimaginable power, control over life and death, dominion over the gods themselves. He was willing to sacrifice anything for that knowledge. So, in the dead of night, he ventured into the depths of a hidden temple where the Book of Names was said to be kept, buried beneath layers of dust and forgotten rituals. There, in the heart of the temple, Ahau found the book. Its pages were blank at first, as if waiting for him. Didn't understand. The book, though ancient, seemed empty. But then, the shadows in the room began to stir. Ael's hands, trembling with anticipation, opened the book again. And there, in the flickering candlelight, the pages began to fill. Names, ancient and forgotten, appeared before his eyes, etched in shimmering glyphs that seemed to move with a life of their own. Ahau couldn't resist. He began to read aloud, his voice trembling as he spoke the names of gods long erased, of creatures that dwelled in places beyond time. The moment the first name left his lips, the air grew thick with power. He could feel the very fabric of reality tremble, as if the world itself were coming undone. But he didn't stop. With each name he spoke, he felt the gods and creatures he invoked stir in the depths of the universe, drawn toward him like moths to a flame. He felt their presence, the weight of their power, and in that moment, he knew he had control. But power, as always, comes at a price. As Ahau continued, his body began to wither. His skin grew pale, his hands trembled, and his breath became ragged. The entities he'd called forth pressed closer, their forms shadowy and indistinct, yet their power undeniable. They whispered to him, a cacophony in his mind. The more names he spoke, the more they demanded of him, his soul, his body, his very essence. And as the book filled with names, his own name began to fade from his memory, as if the power he'd summoned was slowly consuming him, erasing him from existence. Ahau, consumed by his own hubris, couldn't stop. He sought to bind the gods to his will, to make them obey his every command. But as the final name was spoken, as the last of the gods was summoned, something went wrong. The power he had unleashed was too great, too wild. The world itself seemed to crack, and with that crack, Ael's body disintegrated, his soul torn from his mortal form. The book of names, still open, began to burn, its pages turning to ash, but the names within it did not disappear. They lingered in the air, a whispering void, waiting to be spoken again. The book of names, like all powerful artifacts, was sealed away, its knowledge hidden from the world. But the names still linger, forgotten by most, but remembered by a few. And those who know of the book's power know that it is only a matter of time before someone dares to open it once again. But the cost is clear. To speak the names is to lose yourself in exchange for control over the universe. You, standing at the precipice of this ancient truth, have to wonder, will the next person who finds it be able to resist its call? Or will they too be consumed by the shadows of the names they dare to speak? Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this journey into the unknown, be sure to subscribe for more. Have you ever stood in complete silence and felt a strange weight in the air? An ancient, unspoken truth that seems to press down on your very soul? It's the knowledge that gods, too, were once mortal, bound by the same laws they now shape. They, too, feared the shadows that lurk just beyond their control. But there's one thing that separates gods from mortals. One thing that gives them dominion over heaven and earth: their capacity for sacrifice. They knew that creation demands a cost, and so they made a sacrifice, one that would seal their divine authority and bind the world to their will. In the mythic age before time, when the world was young, Itzamna stood as one of the most powerful gods. His knowledge was vast, his wisdom unmatched. But with that power came fear of being undone, of being eclipsed. It's said that in a moment of great peril, the gods gathered in the heavens. A rebellion was stirring. Mortals and even lesser deities sought to cast off their divine chains. Itzamna, feeling this creeping threat, made a choice that would change existence forever. In the secret chambers of the celestial realm, Itzamna stood alone. He saw that the other gods had grown complacent, comfortable in their divine rule, untouched by time or decay. They had forgotten what it meant to give of themselves for the greater good. And this, more than anything, threatened to undo them all. So Itzamna decided he would give everything. His act would be a complete surrender of his divine essence. He would become both creator and destroyer, giving up his immortality, his endless wisdom, his dominion over writing and shadows. He would surrender his very nature so the world could continue to turn. But the cost was immense. As Itzamna began the ritual, he felt the very fabric of his being stretched to its breaking point. This wasn't an act of violence, but one of pure surrender. The heavens themselves wept as he let go of everything that made him a god. The sky, once clear, filled with the tears of the gods, which fell like rain upon the earth. These divine tears gave life to the plants, the animals, and the very humans who would one day walk the world. But there was no joy in this creation, for as the gods wept, so did Itzamna. His tears were not of sorrow, but of sacrifice. His name, his power, his very essence scattered across the world. Hidden where mortals could never reach, forgotten by those who once worshipped him. And with that, Itzamna ceased to be. He was no longer the god of writing and shadows. He was a whisper, a memory, a shadow living only in the tears of the sky. The gods were changed. They became weaker, their reign no longer absolute. And in their weakness, they began to fear. Without Itzamna's guiding hand, the world became a place of chaos. But his sacrifice left something behind. Not his knowledge, not his power, but something far more dangerous: the potential for chaos. A seed planted in the very heart of existence, waiting for the right moment to awaken. The gods knew this, but they dared not speak of it, fearing that to acknowledge it would be to awaken the very force they tried to bury. That potential is still there. It's in the tears of the sky, in the rain that falls, in the cracks of forgotten temples. It waits, dormant, but never truly gone. And as you stand here now, you too can feel the weight of Itzamna's sacrifice. You feel it in the air, in the pulse of life that connects all things. You can sense it beneath the surface, hidden in the shadows. It is waiting. It always waits. The tears of the sky are still falling. Thanks for watching. The journey through this darkened path of forgotten gods grows heavier still. The deeper you delve, the more you understand that the story of Itzamna, once believed lost in time, has always been fragmented. You can feel the weight of the missing pieces, the lost knowledge, the broken glyphs, scattered and hidden beneath layers of civilization and centuries of erasure. These shards of truth hold the key to what was lost and what could still be found. But piecing them together is no simple task. Ancient Maya created a codified language of symbols, a divine script that could capture the essence of the universe in a single glyph. These weren't just characters. They were portals, windows to the cosmos, containing the very forces of life, death, and creation. Among these sacred symbols were those directly linked to Itzamna, the god who inscribed the laws of the universe. His influence was everywhere, but as time passed, much of his knowledge was stripped away or hidden. Yet, even in this erasure, traces remain. Fragments of lost glyphs still surface carved into stone tablets, hidden beneath the roots of ancient trees and forgotten corners of temples. These fragments, seemingly nonsensical, hold the keys to decoding Itzamna's lost knowledge. Scholars have spent centuries trying to understand them. Some have pieced together small portions, while others have been driven mad by symbols that refuse to make sense. One such scholar, a man named Itzamna, dedicated his life to this task. His obsession began in a remote jungle library, where a codex had been found, a relic untouched by time. The codex was a collection of fragmented texts, riddled with incomplete glyphs. What drew Itzamna to it was its connection to Itzamna. He believed the key to the god's true power lay within these fragments. Itzamna spent years studying the codex, cross-referencing symbols with other finds. The task was maddening. Every time he neared a breakthrough, a new set of symbols would contradict his understanding. Some glyphs seemed to have multiple meanings, shifting depending on the angle they were viewed. Others appeared to evolve, as if alive. The deeper Itzamna went, the more he became consumed. He began to see the symbols everywhere in the stars, in the ocean waves, in the very motion of the earth. It was as if the universe itself was trying to speak to him. But with every discovery came a price. The symbols that once promised enlightenment now felt like chains. Itzamna's body grew weak, his mind frayed as the knowledge slipped through his fingers like sand. He started hearing whispers from the glyphs themselves, in languages he couldn't understand. Yet, he couldn't stop. He knew the key to the universe was hidden here, and he would stop at nothing to unlock it. One day, poring over the codex, he stumbled upon a fragment, a single unseen glyph. It wasn't standard Maya script. Its shape was angular and sharp, like a broken stone. When Itzamna traced it, the air in the room grew heavy. The walls seemed to tremble. A chill ran down his spine. He realized this glyph was more than a symbol, it was a doorway. A gateway to a deeper forbidden knowledge hidden for millennia. His hand shook as he spoke, the glyph aloud, not fully understanding its meaning. The room distorted, shadows deepening into something tangible, alive. The air grew thick with power, its vision blurred, and in the darkness, he saw something ashape, a figure flickering at the edge of his sight. It was not a god he recognized, but something older. The glyph had opened a door, and Itzamna knew he had crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. The figure that emerged was not of this world. It was a presence, a force moving through the fabric of reality itself. Itzamna's mind couldn't comprehend it. As he gazed upon it, he felt his body disintegrate, like dust in the wind. His last thoughts were not of horror, but of understanding. The fragmented glyphs had unlocked something far beyond even Itzamna's knowledge. The very forces of the universe had been shaped by these symbols. The codex, the glyphs, the lost knowledge, they were not just records of the past. They were portals to a deeper, darker truth. A truth that Itzamna, in his wisdom, had hidden from the world. A truth no mortal mind was meant to understand. As we stand in the wake of this discovery, we are left with a single, haunting question. What happens when the pieces of the puzzle are finally put together? The answer, it seems, lies in the shadows, the fragments that remain, waiting, even as they threaten to consume all who seek them. Thank you for joining me on this journey. If you find these stories as fascinating as I do, consider subscribing for more explorations into the unknown. Do you feel that? It's a deep hum, something ancient, vibrating through the very air around you. It's the stirring of a prophecy long buried, whispered in the darkest corners of forgotten temples, lost beneath the weight of time. The words have been obscured, but they still linger, caught between the threads of forgotten knowledge, a promise and a warning intertwined. Because Itzamna, the god of writing and shadows, is not truly gone. His name might have been struck from the world, but his power, his knowledge, his very essence, they are not so easily erased. The prophecy speaks of his return, not as the god he once was, but as something else, something far darker, far more profound. It said, his return will bring an era of great change, an age where the lines between the known and the unknown will blur, where the fabric of reality itself will begin to unravel. The prophecy is a riddle, shrouded in mystery. But one thing is certain, when Itzamna returns, it won't be a moment of divine enlightenment. It will be a time of reckoning, a moment when the world will face the consequences of having forgotten him. The ancient texts are fragmented, but in the whispers of scholars and the dreams of those who seek his knowledge, a clearer picture emerges. Itzamna's return isn't just a restoration. It's a return to the primal, chaotic forces of creation, the very forces that he once wrote into existence. The prophecy speaks of a time when knowledge will no longer be a gift, but a curse. When the act of writing will no longer be innocent, but an invocation of forces beyond our comprehension. The first signs, it is said, will be in the sky. When the stars align in a certain pattern, and the constellations that once held the weight of his knowledge begin to shift, his presence will be felt again. Those who are attuned to the whispers of the universe will feel it first. Scholars, seekers of forgotten truths, scribes, they will begin to hear the call, faint at first, like wind rustling through the pages of an ancient manuscript. But the call will grow louder, clearer, impossible to ignore. This is when the world will begin to change. Hidden knowledge will resurface, leaking into the minds of those ready to receive it. But with this knowledge come the shadows that were always there, waiting, because Itzamna's knowledge was never meant for mortal minds to hold entirely. The more you understand, the more you become bound to his will, the more you risk being consumed by the very power you sought to control. But this prophecy isn't all doom and gloom. Some believe Itzamna's return brings the possibility of rebirth. They see a chance to unlock the true potential of the universe, to return to a time when mortals could shape their own destinies. These seekers believe his return will bring an era of enlightenment, freeing humanity from the shackles of divine power, allowing us to write our own fate. But even they cannot escape the truth. The return of Itzamna will not be without cost. His presence will stir the shadows, and those who seek to control the knowledge he once held will be bound to him forever, losing themselves in the vast web of fate. It's said that no mortal can truly understand the nature of his return, for to do so would be to invite madness. The prophecy warns that only those willing to sacrifice everything will be able to unlock the power Itzamna once wielded. And even then, they will never be free from the shadows that cling to him. The real truth of the prophecy lies not in its words, but in its silence. It's a message hidden not for lack of trying, but for fear of what might happen if it's ever fully understood. The prophecy itself is a riddle, written in a language that can only be deciphered by those whose minds have been opened by the knowledge of Itzamna's power. For those who seek the truth, it's not a question of asterisk, if asterisk he will return, but asterisk when asterisk canned what they will be willing to sacrifice to bring him back. And you, as you stand in this moment between the past and the future, you feel the weight of this ancient prophecy pressing down on you. You too are drawn to the knowledge that he once held, to the mysteries he left behind. You understand the risks, know that to seek the truth is to invite the shadows into your life. But even so, you feel the pull, the call of the unknown, the lure of the forgotten god. The return of Itzamna is inevitable. And as much as you may fear it, you also understand his return is necessary. For how can knowledge, once hidden, ever remain buried? And how can the shadows ever truly be erased? The whispers are growing louder now. The prophecy speaks of an end, but it also speaks of a beginning of something new, something beyond what the gods can control. It is a moment, still far off, but not distant enough to be ignored. And you have to wonder, are you ready to listen? Thanks for joining me on this journey. If If you enjoy exploring the forgotten corners of lore and prophecy, make sure to like and subscribe for more. Our world is drowning in noise. The constant hum of cities, the endless stream of information, the chatter of billions. But what if I told you that in the deepest, most forgotten corners of the world, there's a worship that thrives not in sound, but in its absolute absence. A cult that doesn't seek the glory of gods, but the shadow of something far more ancient. They are known only in whispers as the cult of silence. They venerate Itzamna, the Mayan god, not as the bringer of creation, but as the gatekeeper of forgotten knowledge, the kind that binds power and reality together. They don't want to conquer the world. They want to rewind it, to return it to a primal, untamed state before the gods themselves, when knowledge was a curse. This cult is unlike any other. They offer no sacrifices. They seek no dominion. Their temples are hidden spaces where the air hangs thick with unspoken truths. Their members aren't power-hungry fanatics. They are scholars, thinkers, driven by a desperate hunger for understanding. They believe true enlightenment comes not from speaking, but from listening. Listening to the shadows, to the whispers that echo in the very fabric of reality. Their rituals are held in complete, unnerving darkness. Members gather in a silent circle, eyes closed, breathing slow and measured. They don't speak, they don't pray, they just listen. It's said that in these moments of profound stillness, the universe itself holds its breath, and Itzamna, the god of shadows, draws near. His presence isn't a brilliant light or a divine voice. It's a subtle shift in the air, a flicker of understanding that passes through the mind like a whisper on the wind. A scholar named Olin, obsessed with forgotten texts, once sought them out. He had spent years deciphering ancient glyphs, but the ultimate truth always eluded him. In desperation, he found the cult, hoping their silence held the answers. When he entered their chamber, the stillness was absolute, profound, and deeply unsettling. Compelled by a force he couldn't name, he sat down, and for the first time in his life, he simply listened. What Olin experienced was beyond words. He heard nothing, and yet he heard everything. The absence of sound was deafening. He felt his mind pulled into a void, stretching in ways he never imagined. The silence wasn't empty. It was alive, filled with a presence both terrifying and inspiring. And in that void, Olin finally understood. The knowledge he craved wasn't in books or scrolls. It was in the silence itself, in the spaces between what is known. When the ritual ended, Olin's mind was no longer his own. He had glimpsed a reality hidden by the gods, knowledge that could unravel the world. For in the silence, he had heard the voice of Itzamna in words, but in the unspoken truth that lies beneath all things. He had found what he was looking for, but the price was steep. Olin's mind, once sharp, is now lost in that abyss, consumed by the forbidden knowledge. He has become a silent vessel, a witness to the universe's darkest secrets. He no longer speaks. He no longer writes. He just listens, forever waiting for the next whisper from the depths. The cult of silence continues to thrive in the shadows, listening. And as you sit here at the edge of this story, perhaps you can feel it too. The pull of that silence, quiet invitation to listen. Because the truth that Itzamna left behind was never meant to be spoken. It was meant to be heard. The question is, are you ready to listen? Thanks for watching. If you enjoy exploring the shadows, be sure to subscribe and follow for more journeys into the unknown. You stand on the precipice, at the very boundary between the known and the unknown, between light and shadow. You can feel the weight of Itzamna's presence, like a whisper on your skin. All the pieces are now in place. The fragments of his story, the shattered glyphs, the dark cults, the forbidden knowledge. But the final truth has yet to be revealed. The long journey you've taken has led you to this moment, this vision, this dream that haunts the very fabric of your being. This is not a dream of comfort or clarity. No, this is a dream of unraveling, a vision so ancient, so far beyond your comprehension that it defies explanation. It is a vision of the end of all things. The moment when the veil between the mortal world and the divine is lifted, when the gods themselves can no longer maintain the fragile balance between creation and destruction. This is the nod of a civilization, not of an age, but of existence itself. In this vision, the sky is torn asunder, not by fire, but by the subtle unraveling of the stars. They no longer shine. They flicker, their light growing dimmer with each passing moment. The constellations that once held the gods' names are now scattered, erased from the fabric of reality. Chaos doesn't fill the void, but silence does, a silence far deeper than any absence of sound. It is the silence of everything forgotten, of all that was once known, now lost to the void. The earth beneath your feet begins to crack, not in destruction, but in release. The very foundation of the world gives way, as if the lines that once separated time, space, and memory are no longer strong enough to hold. And in the heart of this silence, you hear Itzamna's name. It isn't spoken aloud, but felt an echo in the marrow of your bones, a tremor in the core of your being. His presence is subtle, like the first breath of wind before a storm. But it is there. The god of writing and shadows is returning, but not as the creator he once was. He is not the god who carved the laws of the universe into the sky. He is something older, more primal, a force that existed before the gods, before the stars themselves. It's not coming to restore the world. He is coming to undo it. The vision shifts. You see glimpses of mortals, those who once worshipped the gods now walking in a dreamlike state. Their faces are blank, their eyes empty, as though they no longer recognize the world around them. They are not dead, but they are not alive either. They are caught between realms, in a place where time has no meaning and memory has no power. The knowledge that once bound them to their gods is fading into nothingness. There in the distance you see a figure. You see it though you cannot fully comprehend it. It is not a god, nor is it a mortal. It is a presence, a shadow, clothed in the form of something older still. Its face is hidden, obscured by the darkness that surrounds it. But you know it, you feel it. It is the essence of Itzamna, not as a god of knowledge, but as a being of pure, raw force. This is the return the prophecy spoke of, the moment the world will no longer be able to hold its form. The vision begins to fade, not into nothingness, but into everything. It's as though the boundaries between you and the dream have dissolved, as though the dream has become you. The veil between worlds grows thin, and you can see it all, the beginning, the middle, and the end. Everything you have ever known is caught in this endless unraveling. Time ceases to have meaning. In this place, you understand there is no true end, only a return. A return to something that was before the gods, before creation itself. You awaken, though it's hard to say when you were asleep or when you were awake. The world around you is the same, and yet it is not. The air feels heavier now, thick with the truth you've seen, the shadows you've touched. Itzamna's return is not a celebration, nor is it a catastrophe. It's a return to something beyond understanding. His return will not restore the world or bring order. It will bring the end of forgetting, a return to the void from which all things came. The dream lingers in your mind like a shadow, casting its dark shape over everything you thought you knew. You understand now. The return of Itzamna is not the return of knowledge. It is the return of silence. The silence before words were written, before the gods carved their names into the sky. It is the return to the space where everything begins, ends as everything ends. And as you stand here in the presence of this knowledge, you realize that the next whisper is older still. A whisper that only those who truly listen will ever hear. You stand at a threshold, a place far greater than yourself. The air is still, heavy with the weight of what's been revealed and what is yet to come. This journey of discovery has led you through the forgotten paths of gods and shadows, through silent spaces where written words dissolve into the void. But now you know, as all who have sought Itzamna's knowledge have come to realize, to know is to lose. The more you uncover, the more you are drawn into the silence that has always existed beneath the surface of creation. Itzamna's story isn't one of glory or redemption, but of absence. The gods themselves, in their divine wisdom, erased his name, his influence, his power. Because they knew, just as you now know, that some knowledge is not meant to be understood. Some truths are too dangerous, too raw, too primal to be contained. Itzamna's gift was one of creation, but his true power lay in uncreation, in the unraveling of the world. His wisdom was not in building the universe, but in the destruction of understanding. For in his silence, in his shadows, There is a knowledge so deep, so unfathomable, that it is beyond the grasp of even the gods. As you stand in this final silence, the world around you seems to tremble, though no sound reaches your ears. It is as though the very fabric of reality is holding its breath, waiting for the moment when all that has been constructed will fall apart. And in that moment, you understand. The end of knowledge is not the destruction of information, but the return of something deeper. It is the return of the void from which all things came, the return to the primordial state of being, where there is no need for words, no need for understanding, so there is only being. Itzamna, the god of writing and shadows, is not gone. He has never truly been gone. His influence remains in the silence that echoes between the stars, in the shadows that cling to the edges of existence. The return of Itzamna is not a physical resurrection, but a return to the place where all things begin and where all things must ultimately return. It is the return to the silence before language, the darkness before creation. And in that silence, there is no meaning. There are no answers. There are only shadows. The scholars who sought his knowledge, the scribes who wrote in his name, the seekers who delved into the deepest corners of forgotten temples, all of them were searching for something they could never truly grasp. For in the end, the knowledge they sought was not something that could be written down, not something that could be understood by mortal minds. It was a truth that existed beyond understanding. It was the end of knowledge itself, the point where all things dissolve into the void. And now, as you stand at the edge of that final silence, you realize that you, too, have been caught in this web. You have sought answers, but the more you have uncovered, the less you have understood. You are not the first to fall into this trap, and you will not be the last. The knowledge of Itzamna, once sought by gods and mortals alike, is not something to be found. It is something to be lost. This final silence is the end of all things, the end of creation, understanding, and time itself. But it is not an end in the way that mortals think of endings. It is not a destruction, not a cataclysm. It is a return to something older, something beyond the reach of gods and men. The silence is a place where words have no meaning, where knowledge is an illusion, where the world as you know it dissolves into the shadows of forgotten things. And in that final silence, there is a whisper, soft, almost imperceptible sound, like the rustle of pages turning in an ancient dust-covered book. It is the whisper of Itzamna, not as a god, but as a memory. A memory of something that was once written, once understood, but now lost. A memory of a time, before language, before creation. The whisper calls to you, as it has called to all those who have sought knowledge before you. It promises answers, but in truth, it leads only to more questions. You realize, standing in the stillness, that you will never find the answers you seek. The knowledge you have pursued has always been an illusion, a shadow of something that can never be fully understood. The final silence is not an end, but a beginning of something beyond comprehension, something that exists only in the space between words, in the spaces between thoughts. And as the shadows close in around you, as the whisper of Itzamna fades into the void, you know that you are not alone. You've always been part of this journey, this descent into the forgotten, the lost. The gods may be silent, but the silence itself speaks. This journey does not end here. It has only just begun. And if your candle hasn't gone out, then you're probably ready for the next god. Thanks for watching. Follow us for the next part of the story.